I would like to say hello and good evening to the listeners and viewers of the old Henderson Real News Show. Again, folks, we're here today to give you the real news, and we want you to understand that this show is titled Organize, Don't Criticize the Human Enemies of Mankind, Their Relatives, and Their Supporters. That's what you will hear on the old Henderson Real News Show. We will give you the real news that other people think about and won't talk about. And we want you to know, folks, that there are some things going on in America and the world that black people can do to change their status as what we call an unwanted member of society to one that is in demand to rule. That's what you will learn on the Old Henderson Real News Show. And that's why I want you all to keep in mind, organize, don't criticize the human enemies of mankind, their relatives, and their supporters. A lot of people call me and write me and ask me, Doc, who is the enemy? Who are those people that you are talking about, the human enemies of mankind, their relatives, and their supporters? And I tell them all. Why should I tell you everything? Won't you do the research and find out? Won't you Google that? Google it. Go to that free university called Google University and find out who the enemies are of mankind. Then you know who their relatives are and their supporters. That's all I'm going to tell you today. But now, on yesterday, we were talking about part one of the fact that we have 47.2 million blacks in America. And I want you all to understand that with the situation as we are populating this country, black people in America can control over 35% of this country if they use the model that we have researched and put together. And we will show you and prove it to you that if you pool certain resources and talents, and we will get specific today because today the show is labeled as part two, about the 40.2 million blacks. Matter of fact, 47.2 million in America. And we are having one thing in mind, and we want you to have this in mind. We are saying on this show and others that the blacks in America have fallen from the number 2 position in the economic, political, and pecking order in America since the 1960s to the 10th pecking order in America today, from number 2 to number 10 in about 75 years. The status of black people in America and the world is decreasing. There's very little impact on what people do as far as blacks are concerned. Nothing positive that's said about black people worldwide. You don't find black people organizing. Most of them are criticizing the human enemies of mankind. The other segment that's not criticizing, they are praying all the time about what they want the Lord or God to do for them, and that's all they do, just pray and criticize. They don't put programs together and organize themselves, pool their resources and talents, and put specific programs together, as you will hear on this show, and make change happen. You have to make it, folks. The suppressors of human dignity will never relent if you just criticize them. You have to organize. And that's why we are telling you today and going to show you in part two, where we are putting emphasis on the 47.2 million blacks in America. We're going to shift this, and any time we say America, we're talking about black people worldwide. We have about 75% of the people worldwide are considered black. And I'm not talking about those other mixtures in this area that are considered black in some instances. Otherwise, they are called whites. Otherwise, themselves as Indians, and some call themselves Hispanics that are black. It's just important to understand that the so-called supermajority has been diluted to the point where 75% of the people of the world are going to be so-called non-European. You can call them black, you can call them colored, you can call them anything you want. But if you are in a position where you are 47.2% of the people in America that can control 35% of this country and you don't do it, and then you're 75% of the world and you don't control the world's policies and economics, I tell you, you deserve what you get. So don't say that you are not going to know what to do, folks. If you want to organize, you're going to find out on the Henderson Real News Show. Organize, don't criticize. Now let's look at the history of this important topic so you can see for the second time or third time, some of you never heard it before, and some have heard it indirectly, didn't believe it, because they heard other people say it, and they didn't do like the research team at the Henderson Real News Show, where we research everything we say. And we have old documents, old records, old newspapers, old journal articles that will allude to what you hear on this show. And many times we don't have time to quote all these things we tell you. That's why we tell you, do your research. Google it when you hear something on this show and you get the real information. Now, one thing, folks, you have to understand, that as you look at your situation throughout the world, I'm talking about black people or those that align themselves with black people, and when we are saying that it appears that there's a system in place, there's systemic racism all over the world for black people, and I will tell you, folks, historically that is true. You can't deny. It can be proven by the records of the people that practice all of this racism in America and the world. But I want to show you that this is something that I could consider not new, because if you look at the old records, during the historical records that we have reviewed, prior to the 1500s, folks, the black people in Africa were the world's first humans to devise and develop the first systems of leadership, education, economic development, politics, and social intersecting relationships with others. Even though they did just like the other people throughout the world later, when they found people in an area that they had to come to survive, if they didn't relent and let them come in freely and use the resources, they fought them. And later on, they set up what we call interconnecting or intersecting relationships with those folks, and they learned to work together, even though initially some of them were put in slavery for a short while. Now I'm talking about up to about 1500. Prior to that time, Africans were the world's smartest people, the most organized people in the world, and others in North America, South America, and other places were just nomads, wandering and moving from place to place, living in caves, on mountaintops, in the valleys, and in the trenches of the world, just trying to make it, eating, struggling, moving, fishing, hunting, and fighting among themselves in elements. And as they had a chance to develop, they gradually start seeing other people doing other things, and they say to themselves at all times, and people do that today, I think we need to do that. But do we want to associate with those people? They most certainly said it, and they said we are going to take over. And that's exactly why during the earlier part of the 1500s, about 1550 up to the present time, you find that the Europeans and other international leaders, except the Africans, moved to create their own systems and claim those that were created by the Africans. They said the Europeans were the greatest educators in the world. They set up the big systems. They say they had some of the greatest European leaders in the world during ancient times. The records will prove otherwise. They said they had the strongest and best economic developers and politicians in the world, in the ancient world. During that time, folks, it were the Africans, the black Africans, the movers and the shakers, and the pyramid builders, the people that knew how to manage and work with the star system, how to look up in space at the galaxies, and they plotted their movements, and they lived by those superstitious ideas that they created. Some of them call them superstition, others call them scientific, and it worked today. And with all of this inter-social relationship building that the Africans put together after they moved into an area, I told you before in the introduction that black Africans learned to live with the people. And the slaves they had, they allowed them to move into the realm of citizenship eventually. And even during the time when the Africans had slaves, they gave them an opportunity to become entrepreneurs. Many of them were rulers. They were in the military, even though they were bound to the African kings and queens in certain areas. But after the 1550s, folks, when the Europeans and their leaders came to the African regions of the world, they decided that we are going to review the black people and see all the good things they have done, and we are going to claim them. We're going to claim all the good and rename the black people and give them characteristics that will be negative, give us characteristics that's going to be positive, and throughout the period of 200 or 300 years, we will have historical records to show that black people worldwide are the worst, the laziest, the unnecessary, uncaring people in the world, shiftless, will not work, can't trust them, and all they want to do is have a good time and die and go to heaven. And then the Europeans and their supporters will say just the opposite about themselves, that we are the best, we are the purest, we are white as gold, that we live long time, we have good health, we are honorable, on and on and on. Do the research, folks. I'm just hitting the top of this. So when you hear someone talking about a group or an individual consistently saying that he or she is no good, I guarantee you start dating when you hear this information, and in 15 to 100 years, you will find that their status will be demoted to a point of no return, where the people that change their status through the history and the records and other moral and what I call traditional means, that group then can be ostracized to the point where they could be killed, criticized, castrated, or just actually assassinated with impunity. Read the history books. Do the research, and you will find that's the state black people are in today, in the South, in the North, in the East and Western part of America, and throughout the world. And that's why we will be talking today about how to build communities where you create a new man by creating new leaders, starting on the local level. Then you put them on the state level. Then you put those new leaders that you train on the national level. And at the same time, you then have people ready for international policy making and economic activity. We have programs that can teach you how to do that, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why today I'm just going to give you a summary of what you can do to change the status of black people and stop believing what you have heard to the point where you believe it 100% that black people are no good, that they don't even know how to manage the money they have. I've told you on many shows that if you do a lot of the research, you will find that if you give a black man $100 million, he's going to spend $99.5 million to other people. He's going to spend it with them. He's going to give it to them. That's why if you look at the research, you'll find that black people in America and in the world are what we call consumers, not policy developers. They are order takers, not policy makers. That's what they say about black people in America. That's what they say about black people all over Africa and Asia and Latin America and other places where you find them. That is historically written in the documents, whether it's true or not. But sometimes when you look at the historical and institutional racism, folks, that's been practiced from the mid-1500s through today, you will find that there were certain reasons why black people in America and worldwide were not in a position to take over the economic policies or work with the politicians in America or in Africa, where they were independent to make their own decisions. In America, you only had one period where you had what we call political equality in America, and that was after the Civil War. 1860 to 1865, they had that so-called Civil War in America, as they've had in almost every nation in the world that were developed by man. They always fought each other for a while. And in America, you had brothers and sisters fighting against each other over human bondage. The Southerners said in so many words, you don't want to believe me, do the research, that we love these black folks down here in the South. 15 states said it, that we want to keep them. We love them, even though they are lazy, shiftless. They can't think on their own. They worry too much about heaven. We still love them and want to keep them because they are making us rich. And the Northerners said, you all are getting too rich. We're going to have to sort of whip you in line, because even though we're making a lot of money off these slaves, we're having a lot of problems international, because we are talking one thing, we're talking about democracy, we are talking about representative government, we're talking about freedom for all and promoting the general welfare of Americans, and we're not doing that. And some of our peers are saying that slavery has to go. And it did in about 1880. 1808, by the way, in America. No more so-called slaves from the other nations of the world. The rule then was you create your own slaves. You make your own slaves from now on. You have slave breeding plantations. They were all over America, especially where the slaves were, basically in the South. They had breeding plantations in Virginia, in North and South Carolina, in Mississippi, and other places, special places where they put more emphasis on breeding and selling slaves as they would relinquish their opportunity to plant cotton and corn and tobacco. Some of their slave owners got rich breeding slaves. Many of them were their own descendants, where they created the slave, the uncle, the father, the plantation owner, and he sold his child, his grandchild, to the slave market to make that money, to get rich. You don't see that too much in the book. They overlook that. And everyone knows that if you want to make history, you write the books. You write the articles. You publish the information so the people can hear it and learn it and see it, and they will believe it. And those that you don't want to learn or do anything, you tell them it's against the law to get an education, that you can't learn to read. You're too ignorant to learn how to read and write. You don't need to do that. My job is to give you a job, take care of your housing, give you enough medical care to keep you alive, and make sure you have a job from birth to death. You don't need anything else. And even if I treat you worse than a slave, worse than my animals, you have to learn to love me and forgive me, because my God, which is also your God, will look at you once you get to heaven and pull you in, put you in his bosom, and let you walk along those streets of gold. And you'll be able to ride on the wings of the angels and eat that good honey, and won't ever have to worry about pain anymore. And these European slave owners told our ancestors that, and they believed it, and a lot of them still believe it today. They still don't believe that they have the right to learn and earn, save and invest, and fight for their human dignity, not pray over it. You don't pray over your human entities. When you have disparities in what is happening versus what's in the Constitution of the state and national governments, you have to demand that you get the same rights as others. And there are ways to do it, and that's exactly what I'll be talking about today and tomorrow, because this series on how to build black community and the leadership structure, you're going to find this very interesting to some of you. Some of you already know it, but you're afraid to do it because you've been taught to love your enemies. You've been taught to love the people that will kill you in a minute. They'll kiss you on the right cheek and cut your throat the next day and won't get punished. And if you just think about it and somebody hear you say it and you ought to do it, you'll be prosecuted for thinking about murder, thinking about self-defense. When you know anything, you'll be raided. You'll lose your job just because people say you said it. That's what we want you to continue to think about, folks, that you would have to change these policies by organizing and not criticizing other people. And if you want to be specific, you have to understand that black people throughout the world, starting in the South, have the greatest opportunities to do this, because we showed you last week and this past Tuesday that the black people in America can control most of 33 different states, and especially the major cities in 33 major states in America. And in just a few years, if they organize as they will be taught throughout the next 6 years, those groups that want to hear it, they'll be able to take over governorships, the Senate, the House, the judgeships, the superintendent of education in many states, in many districts throughout the South, the West, the North, and in some parts of the eastern United States. We have the information, folks, where the concentrations are. So the idea is that anywhere black people are in the majority in any area, started on the precinct level, the city level, the county level, the state level, the region level. If you have a majority in a region, you should control the following areas of activity with your vote. And then with those new leaders that we're going to teach you how to train, you can rule and have equity and fairness for all the people. If you want to change your life and your status, and if you want to create a district in your mind and physically in your area where you live, you can do it if you're in a majority and you do the following. First, from birth to death, you must start thinking about controlling 5 areas of activity. These 5 areas that I will be talking about, I've been talking about them already for 15 or 20 years. Locally and other places, there has been some impact, positive impact. But as you hear this, folks, and invite us to come to you and talk about it more at your churches and schools and community organizations, we'll tell you more. But we've learned from research and from history. You don't tell everything that you do and know. You don't share it on social media. That's what you don't do. That's why a lot of the rappers and others are in trouble. They have talked about how they want to kill competitors in certain regions, in certain states, and talking about what they are going to do to them because they think they're going to do something bad to them as they speak. And later on, when people start dying and getting shot, you find that those very rappers and others are in court. And the judges and the prosecutors going to use their language, their songs and their writings, and say, here is the evidence. And they're going to have the jury already selected that's prone to believe all that evidence that they present, because you are not going to have a lawyer with the ability to present information for your defense, because you have spent all your money on things that I'm not going to even mention because it's too embarrassing. A lot of you all end up with a public defender. And everybody know that these public offenders, many of them are good lawyers, males and females. But in most cases, they are paid by the hour or a limited amount per case. And that's why I know personally some public defenders that have 30 to 150 cases assigned to them. And many times they meet their client first on the phone. Second time they meet them, it might be in person for 5 or 10 minutes. And the third time they meet them in court. And then the evidence is not there. They don't have the staff to get that good information. And when the human enemies of mankind has already passed your sentence before they even charge you, they know what prison you're going to. The jury has been monitored, so certain people are not going to get on the jury that's going to look out for your interest. You're going to lose 99% of the time. So that's why, folks, you have to keep in mind, wherever you're in the majority in the world, black folks, you have to control 5 areas of activity from birth to death, even if it's just on the precinct level. And these areas are, again, I told you many times, I'm going to worry you to death with this information. You're going to hear it. You're going to be thinking about it in your sleep. If you want to get out of this bondage that you're in America and in the world as black people, wherever you're in the majority, you're going to have to control education and training, religion, principles of leadership, economic development, and politics in those areas where you're in the majority, starting on the precinct level. I don't know of not one black community in America, not one. We have neighborhoods. A community is where you have all the means, all the goods and the services that can have you living independent of the region or of the state. Your small businesses, your small factories, your small distribution centers, and your small lending institutions, your banking structures, should all be in your community, owned by you, controlled by you with your money, because you have the money to do it. The records show that you spend 98% of your money into others' coffers. You just find them, go to them, buy their junk, and put it in your pocket or in your mouth or around your neck, or eat it or ride in it. Don't save, don't invest. And then you start criticizing people. when they say that's what you're going to do. And you do that because you've been trained to do it. You have mentors and mentees that you have seen and heard that's doing these things. And that's why you want to act like them, look like them, do what they do, and at the same time be whipped down to what I call a baby status, where you can't even take care of yourself. You're a millionaire one day, you're famous one day, and the next one, you're back at home with your mama or your grandma. And that's happening all over the world, in all the populations, but especially in the black people. Now, folks, let's look at the other part of this information to show you how you can control your area of activity. We're going to be coming up on a break pretty soon, and I will get that indicator from the producer. But before we start talking about breaks, people, we're going to give you a short summary or an introduction as to some of the things that you must do as individuals, as community organizations, public and private citizens, in order to make your status rise in the economic, political, and social pecking order to number 1 versus today where you are number 10. Matter of fact, since you were in the second tier up to the 1960s, the mid-1960s, I've been telling you for years, up until the 1965 era, in America, black people can sneeze at the European-American political and economic structure. Just sneeze at them and act like they were not satisfied. And they have run to the federal government and passed some legislation. Supreme Court and others will do certain things to appease the black folks, and they will be happy. And the language will be so, what I call non-demonstrated, ambiguous, and they will pass a law. No one on the state level will pay it any attention, and that was by design, and the same system will continue. They had that up until the day. 10, 15, 20, 30 years passing with laws that's passed for the general welfare of all citizens that have the right to vote and can vote, can change it. But black people don't have the right to vote with clarity in America. Every 10 years, you have to have new legislation initiated by members in Congress, by members in certain state legislatures and others, where they have to, with the work of the NAACP, the Urban League and others, stressing to the senators and the members in the House of Representatives, national and statewide. So let's look at some of these voting patterns, some of this gerrymandering, some of these areas where you are cutting blacks out of the black voting pattern and putting them in the white area where they have the majority white vote. And you're diluting the black vote. And even though you're doing that gradually, you know it's going to take you about 10 or 15 years to eliminate that 1 or 2 black people that you have ruling in those so-called predominantly black areas. You're either going to put one of your folks in there or one of those black people, male or female, that you finance to do your deed. It is happening all over the South, all over the East, North, and Western part of the United States. It is happening and has been happening in Africa since 1550. That's a long time, folks. And you can change all of this and start changing it in 30, 60, or 90 days. And I believe the producer is telling me that it's time for a short break. And if I get that signal, we're going to have a short break, folks, and then we'll come back and continue to talk about how to build communities with what you have, where you are, with your own resources, with your own people. And then you can be the policy makers and not the order takers. You ought to be tired of taking orders when you have the power, the intellectual ability, and the skill, and it's in your system from birth to death to do it. So we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back, folks, and then you'll hear the latter part of this presentation where we are talking about organizing. Don't criticize the human enemies of mankind, their relatives, nor their supporters, because they love it. They love it. They're not going to change until you demand a new order by having a new man to give that order. So stay tuned.
Are you dreaming of becoming an entrepreneur, but you're not sure where or how to start? At Entrepreneurs Academy 101, our online program will guide you step by step on how to start and grow your own business. We offer courses such as how to write a business plan, how to create a budget, and so much more. Our online training program is designed for you to learn at your own pace, and there's no set order to complete this program. Because our academy is online, you have the choice to learn with a group, with friends, or individually. Upon completion of the entire curriculum, you will receive a certificate of achievement to acknowledge that you have completed the training needed to become a successful entrepreneur. So enroll today to design the life that you love. Contact your entrepreneur coach, Brenda Myers, at 601-672-0695 or visit our website at www.entrepreneursacademy101.com for more information.
Have you had your Earth Blend coffee today? At Earth Blend Coffee, we take pride in offering you the very best of beans across the world, blended and roasted to perfection, giving you superior quality and satisfying and flavorful taste. Experience the world in one cup with Earth Blend Coffee. To order, visit earthblendcoffee.co now.
Okay, thank you, viewers and listeners. This is, again, Eldridge Henderson with the real news. The show's topic today and title is Organize, Don't Criticize. This is part 2 of a series going to be about 5 or 6 parts. And we're talking about building communities in areas where you're in the majority, where you use your own resources, your own leaders, your own talents. And we are going to show you how to do it, folks. We've been doing it for years, but we have not been talking about it on the state level, the national level, nor the international level. And at this point, we are doing this on the state, the national, international level, but we're just giving you an introductory summary and not all the details that you're going to need to do this. And we want to have the real need where you want to look at your local area where you're in the majority, and you have your organization structure already there. You have a majority of your people in the school system. You have the majority of your people in the neighborhoods. And you have a majority of your black leaders in leaderless positions, no policy-making position. I'll call them leaderless, where they are there as figureheads only, but in not one commission, not on one board, is there a majority. And if there is a majority, the plant that's chairman will still vote against his or her own interests, to vote for the interests of the human enemy of mankind, their relatives, or their supporters. So that's why I want you to stay with us here. We're going to talk about part 2 again of how blacks in any area where they're in the majority can be controlling 5 areas of activity. Those 5 areas, again, just for your information, those areas are very specifically education and training, religion, leadership, principles of leadership, not just general leadership, but the principles of leadership, economic development, and politics. And that's what I'm getting ready to tell you now. But before some of you click off and go and start doing other things, I just want to give you a short introduction about what we'll be doing as part 3 on tomorrow. As we go into this, we will give you some instances of things that's developing in the state of Mississippi. We're looking at some of the newspapers here. We have a newspaper called the Mississippi Link and the Jackson Advocate. And this week we'll talk about 5 things that are related to what I'm talking about, how you can accomplish things. And the first thing we'll be talking about tomorrow, I know I should wait until the end of this presentation, but I'm not going to do it because we're looking at comments. Some of you don't have too long to listen right now. We're going to just tell you tomorrow, you're going to be hearing, before we get into the meat of the program tomorrow, you're going to hear something about the Jackson water users facing a 13% rate increase January 1st, 2024. The Jackson water users going to be facing a 13% increase. And some say, as of today, the water is not fit to drink. Others say it is. And others say if it's not fit to drink, it doesn't make any difference. You're still going to have to pay a 13% increase, even though thousands of businesses and some homes are not even connected to the water system. We're also going to talk to you, ladies and gentlemen, about another issue on tomorrow, and it's an issue that concerns a lot of people in the Metro Jackson area, and this includes the state of Mississippi, and matter of fact, it has impact all over the nation and the world, and it is something in the paper that says concerns multiply over the selection of the Jackson State University's new president. They have a new president, Dr. Marcus Thompson. We're going to talk about that tomorrow and look at what the concerns are. And then you're going to hear some things tomorrow that's going to be related to how black people can control or don't control the area where they're in the majority. You're going to have an international piece that we're going to talk about tomorrow. And that's in the newspaper. It's in specifically the Jackson Advocate, the issue November the 30th through December the 6th. And it says, the Haitian-American lawyer sues to block the United States-backed deployment of Kenyan troops in Haiti. It's against the Constitution of the Kenyan government and the United States and many other nations to send their militaries to independent countries without their permission and put them in semi-slavery, where they have their own court systems. They take them with them. They take their soldiers. They put them in what we call barracks and tell them to make the law. Follow these laws. Follow these rules. Treat the citizen this way. And then, if they mess up, arrest them and take them to the military courts of justice. This is why this lawyer, this black lawyer, is suing the United States and the Kenyan government. The next thing we'll be talking about on tomorrow is about the fact that we have a new park naming system. It's been renamed. Claiborne Park has been renamed by some great community leaders. And we're going to tell you that the park has been around for years, going into a state of decline. And now certain people have gotten together and put a lot of money up and made plans to make some significant changes in this area that is allegedly controlled by black people. And I'm going to show you now, as we get back into part 2, how all of these things play out, because some of the people are already doing things in this state, and this state is Mississippi. We are broadcasting from Jackson, Mississippi right now, and we are going to 139 different nations throughout the world, all 50 states and other territories, and we are doing this through social media, satellites, YouTube, and everything else you can come up with, and you could hear us anywhere, mostly very clear, throughout the world. And that's why we want to continue now with part 2 of how to organize in areas where you're in the majority, black folks. Don't worry about other people. Worry about yourselves. Worry about your children. Worry about your mothers and your fathers, your grandparents. And worry about what we call the future that's going to span for the next 300 years. That's what you ought to be planning for. And how do you accomplish that, folks? If you want to see things to start changing in 30, 60, and 90 days in your area, anywhere you're in the majority, starting on the precinct level, you can do the following. And you will be able to rule for the next 300 years if you do what you learn today and what you're going to be learning in the future. Because you don't have but 6 years left to do these things in America. And if you don't do the things that you're going to learn on the old Henderson Real News Show, Organize, Don't Criticize, you're going to be in position number 19. We call it the economic pecking order, the political pecking order, the education pecking order, which means they will look at 19 other ideas before they get to yours and your people. In the 1960s, we told you in the introduction, in the 1960s, mid-1960s, up until that period, black people were considered number 2 in the economic, political, and social pecking order. When you got through hollering and demonstrating and burning down a few cities, the European leaders said, we got to appease these black folks. We got to give them a smoke screen. And so we're going to cut out this separate but equal stuff and give you a chance to integrate into the mainstream of America. That wasn't nothing but a smoke screen. We have more segregation now in America than we had in the 1960s. And less money, less businesses. We don't control anything except a few things, which is too embarrassing to talk about. But since I want to get back to the real specifics and show you how you can start tomorrow to start changing your status in areas where you're in the majority, if you do certain things, and you can accomplish this simply by starting tomorrow in your hometown, in your family, in the organizations that you're associated with, especially your churches. And this is what you have to do, folks. You have to talk to yourselves first, your family second, and your communities, and tell them, I am not satisfied with my situation. Others are coming in here and making all the policies. And all we do is just take orders. So I say, folks, you got to be a policy maker rather than an order taker. Keep that in mind. Matter of fact, I'm going to get a copyright on that. Policy maker instead of an order taker. We have already applied for a copyright for that phrase. And folks, this is what you're going to have to do starting in your home to get yourselves in a position where you can get some respect and gain what we call real citizenship. If you're a citizen on paper and you don't get any respect from the government on the local, state, and federal and international levels, you're not considered a real human. You are a default. You're just there until they figure out a way to get rid of you. And I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to be the one leaving here going on that spaceship when they get ready to put you all up in Mars. other people are going to be doing that, and they're going to leave you here. And in a few years, after they get those colonists floating around up there in Mars and other areas in space, you're going to find one day you're going to believe what the Bible said. It's going to be that second coming. You're going to hear a lot of explosions, bombs falling everywhere, big bursts of fire popping up all over the world as we see it, in America, in Asia, in Africa, in Australia, even at the North and the South Pole. You're going to have the fire next time if you don't do what I'm getting ready to tell you now. Here you are, folks. You're in your home. You have a family. The first thing you want to do is pool your resources and your talents. At home, your resources, which means if you're working, you're going to have to look at the money you and your wife or your partner is making. Look at it. You're going to put a budget together and spend on the basis of what you can afford. If you have children in that family, which most of you do, because we have a lot of multi-generational families now, mothers, sons, and daughters living together, grandparents. Sometimes you have the stepmother and stepfather in that situation bringing their children, all kinds of folks up in there. And you look at those resources and talents and determine who is the one with the greatest ability to make decisions, and you relegate those decision-making abilities to those folks that can make the best one. We call that. And once you determine who in your family is the one that can be prone to continue this leadership ability, you start training the leader in your family to take over the budget making. And that's always a young person. You're going to always train that young person. You're going to teach them how to preside at that meeting in the family living room, or bedroom, or wherever they have the meeting. You're going to teach them how to make presentations. You're going to teach that young leader in your home how to take notes and talk from talking points in full sentences. You're going to teach that person in your home that he is going to have to be able to do research for the next family meeting. We have a whole 5-hour series on how to set up these family meetings. And then once he does that, folks, you're going to teach that young person how to go out and start building what we call strategic, non-binding coalitions with others, where you tell them, you have the same problem I have, and we need to build a non-binding coalition to solve these 3 things, and we're not worried about the other problems that we have. Help us with that. We call that a non-binding coalition with others, because you're not going to find others that's not looking like you that want to get you in a position where you are in leadership, where you are the policy maker. So you have to be smart and build these non-binding temporary coalitions with folks to get what you want. And then as this family man is talking to his wife, his partner, and his children, they're going to have to decide as a family that we are going to start our own business. Say, honey, man is talking to his wife, you know, you've been working for a company for 30 years as an accountant, bookkeeper. You know all about bookkeeping and how to put figures together and make budgets and so forth. And I've been working for an energy company for the last 15 years as an assistant manager of installation. And I think it's about time now for us to leave. We've saved some money. We have our budget here, and our account shows that we have about $150,000 in stocks and bonds and savings, and we have some 501ks and others. We have a good little nest egg, honey, and let's start our own business. And folks, since you already know something about business, you have a skill, you start your own business and get your children trained to work in your business. Start them off as the janitor, cleaning the floor. And make sure they're at least 2 years old or older. And let them see mom and daddy going to work. Before they leave that job, they're going to leave in a few years. When you pick them up out of school, you take them to that second job and have them there studying and observing the mom and dad do something. And then as you are talking to those young people, ladies and gentlemen, in the household, the wife and the husband will tell all their children as they get older, say, in this household, we're all going to register. And every time there's a voting taking place in our community, we're going to vote for someone, even if we don't like the persons that are on the ballot, we are going to go and vote anyway and put our name on that list. If you look at a ballot, folks, you'll find they have a blank line down there. You don't have to vote for the people you don't like. You can vote for yourself, and then you go back and organize and not criticize the people they put in office. You don't like them. A lot of people don't like them. But there is a small component of registered voters that's going to vote for the same people. And that's usually 30% or less of the registered voters going to put the same people in office over and over. So what do you have to do, folks? You have to register and manage the vote in your house. Now this is just down to number 5. And since we're going to go through 5 or 6 parts of this on how to build a community, how to control your destiny from birth to death for the next 300 years, we'll start back on it tomorrow, and it's probably going to be a monthly series. It's going on and on. We're going to make it simple for a 3rd grader. But since I know that I've gotten that signal from the producer, we're going to have to say goodbye for today. We'll come on tomorrow, and I want you to call us at 601-201-1957 and say, I want to learn how to organize in my home, in my community, starting on the precinct level, so I can control my destiny from birth to death. Or you might want to call 1-800-492-5186 and talk to Eldridge Henderson and the owner of this place, Socrates Garrett, a great economic development specialist. Matter of fact, we'll be on tomorrow from 5 to 6 p.m. Mississippi time. And we want to talk to you about those issues that I mentioned that we have in our local newspapers. And we'll continue to talk about how you can change your life, your status, and your community starting tomorrow. And you could have changes that you can see in 30, 60, or 90 days, guaranteed. So you stay tuned and call somebody and say, tomorrow at the L. Henderson Real News Show, organize, don't criticize. We'll be back on WeBelieveDigital.com, and I want you all to listen. That's what you tell those folks you call. Thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow.